In this video, I'm going to share my homemade pumpkin pie recipe, as well as show you how to make pie crust from scratch, because why not, especially if it's for Thanksgiving. And we're going to start off by cutting our butter into small chunks. You should use frozen butter because once you blend it with the flour and make the crust and place it in the oven, the steam from the butter will give the crust its flaky layers. And once that's done, we're going to place it in our baby food processor because I ain't got time to be hand blending frozen butter with flour. I also didn't feel like pulling out the big old food processor, so we're going to make the best with the little engine that could. And yes, that is a paper bowl with the flour. It is what it is. It's one less dish for me to wash. We're going to keep it moving. So I just put a little bit of the flour into the food processor, and I'm going to add the chunks of butter into the food processor as well. And when you add them into the food processor, you want to make sure they're evenly spaced around in the food processor. And then once that's done, we're going to add in a half teaspoon of iodized salt. We're just going to pour that on in there. And then once we pour that in there, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of white granulated sugar. That will give the crust a hint of sweetness. And then finally, we're going to add the rest of that flour in my paper bowl into the food processor. And once we get that all in there, we're going to set the bowl aside, give it a good shake to spread around that flour. Then we're going to place the top onto the food processor. And we're going to blend it for a good 15 seconds. And once it's blended for 15 seconds, it should be good to go. See, you got to work smart and not hard. That's exactly how your flour should look once it's blended with the flour. So we're going to set that aside, bring over a large bowl. Then we're going to place that flour and butter blend into the bowl. Be mindful of the fact that if you have some moisture in your food processor like I did, some of it may be stuck at the bottom. Don't leave any in there. We're not trying to waste food. Get a spoon and scoop it on out of there like I'm doing. And there we go. And we're just going to give it a mix to break it up a bit. And then once that's done, we're going to move on to adding the water to the mixture. And this is about 1/4 of a cup of water. And it should be cold water at the very least. Ideally ice cold water. I'd use cold tap water. Cold water is sufficient. And you're going to give it a good stir until it looks exactly like what you see on the screen. It's not quite clay and it's not quite sand, so I suggest you use your imagination. All I can tell you is that it should look exactly like what you see on the screen. And now I'm just going to scrape that bit of dough off the spoon because food's too darn high to be trying to waste it. We're not wasting anything here. And once we get that back in the bowl, we're going to set that bowl aside, and then we're going to lay down our mat and sprinkle a bit of flour onto the mat. This will keep the dough from sticking, and we're just going to dump that shaggy dough onto the mat. And all we're doing is pressing the dough together until it's just combined. When I say just combined, I mean until the dough is not falling apart. You want to be careful not to knead the dough, because if you knead the dough, that will lead to gluten development. And what will happen with too much gluten, once you place the crust in the oven, that will lead to a crust that's extremely hard and dense. And I'm gonna tell you, ain't nobody trying to come over to your house and eat pie that will cause their teeth to crack. So just be careful not to overwork the dough as you're pressing it together. And once this is done, what we're gonna do is refrigerate the dough, as this will allow time for the flour and the dough to hydrate. And now that that's done, we're just going to wrap it in plastic wrap. So I have my sheet of plastic wrap. I'm gonna lay it down onto the mat. And I'm going to place the dough on top of the plastic wrap, and we're going to wrap it tightly. And once that's done, we're going to place it in the refrigerator for anywhere between 30 minutes and 2 hours. So we're just going to ease that on in there now. So at this point, about 30 minutes have passed, so I'm unwrapping the dough. Now, as a fair warning, the dough will be quite stiff once you take it out of the refrigerator, but that's okay. It just means we're going to get a bit of a workout. We're going to work those muscles in order to flatten it out. And I sprinkled some flour on top of the dough. This is to keep the rolling pin from sticking to the dough. Now, if you notice the dough isn't rolling out into a circle, then what you can do is just bring the dough back together and form it into a round symmetrical ball, and then continue rolling it out that way. But before you do, be sure to sprinkle some more flour on top to keep the rolling pin from sticking. And again, we're just going to get in there and roll it out. And just another fair warning, this step will take some time, so if you want to put on some music to pass the time, be my guest. I'm happy to share my playlist with you if you need some song suggestions. And you ultimately want to roll it out until the dough is around 10 to 11 inches in diameter. Because we're using a 9-inch pie plate, you want the dough to overhang the pie plate about 1 inch or 2. So once that's done, we're going to place the dough onto the pie plate, which I have there. Now, I've seen some people try the rolling pin trick where they'll roll in the dough onto the back of the rolling pin and then roll it out inside the pie pan. I don't do that because it typically doesn't work out for me. Picking it up by hand and placing it into the pie pan works just as well. But you're free to do whatever you want in your kitchen. Be my guest. And you want to cut off any excess edges as well, because you only want the dough to overhang about an inch, maybe 2 at most. You want it to overhang at least somewhat because it will shrink some while in the oven. So now we're going to par bake the crust, and I just laid some parchment paper into the pie pan, and on top of the parchment paper I'm going to add some old coffee beans that I have from H-E-B. I don't own any pie weights. You can certainly use pie weights if you own them. You can use old coffee beans as well. You can use rice, you can use regular beans. Anything that would help to weigh down the pie as it par bakes works. And you want to fill it up to the top of the pie pan as well. Now, I've seen so many people just dump the filling right into the pan with the raw crust, and I know the bottom of that crust be soggy as all get out. So that's all the more reason why you should par bake that crust, as that will prevent the crust from becoming soggy as it bakes with the filling. And we're going to bake it in a preheated oven at 350 degrees for around 20 minutes. And you want to place it onto a baking sheet as well. It's for easier handling. Now we're going to move on to making the filling in a small bowl, and yes, I will be using canned pumpkin puree, 15 ounces. Now, if you're one of those overachievers that like to make the pumpkin puree from fresh pumpkins, by all means, that's your prerogative. Just be aware, you can't just use any pumpkins to make pumpkin puree for pumpkin pie, and also you will have to pre-cook that pumpkin puree that you get from the fresh pumpkins. So I just added 2 extra large eggs to the pumpkin puree, and I'm gonna whisk it all together until it's well combined. And once that's done, I'm gonna move on to adding the additional ingredients. So we're just gonna dump the rest of these ingredients on into the bowl, and we're gonna start off by adding our sugars. So here I have a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar, and next I'm gonna add a 1/2 cup of white granulated sugar. And after that, I'm going to add in my spices, and you'll see all of the spices that I'm adding flash on the screen. And we're just going to dump those spices into the bowl. And then finally, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And now we're going to give everything a good stir until it's well combined. And once everything's well combined, we're going to add our final ingredient. And this final ingredient will help to thin out the filling. And what I'm going to be adding is 1 cup of half and half. As the name implies, half and half consists of half heavy cream and half milk. And the heavy cream with its higher fat content really helps to enhance the richness of the filling, whereas the whole milk prevents the filling from becoming too dense. So you get the best of both worlds versus if you were to use one or the other separately. So I just finished whisking together the half and half with the pie filling, and I'm going to set that aside. By this point, the pie crust is done, so I've just removed it from the oven. By the way, if you still want to be lazy and use that frozen Pillsbury pie crust that's sold at the store, that is entirely up to you. Just be aware that you will still need to par bake that crust. Unless, of course, you like a soggy crust, so don't go dumping that filling straight into the store-bought crust either. You still need to par bake it and let it pre-cook. And what I'm doing now is removing those coffee beans from the crust, and now I'm just going to add the filling to the crust. And we're going to fill the pie crust to the very top. There may be a bit of filling left in the bowl, and that's fine because you don't want to overfill the crust either, as it will puff up while it's baking in the oven, which you'll see in a little bit. So I'm going to preheat the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason you want to bake the pie initially at 425 degrees Fahrenheit is this will help ensure that it bakes evenly on the inside. I find after testing this, if you bake the pie at a lower temperature the entire time, the inside of the pie will end up undercooked. So what I'm doing now is I'm placing a pie shield over my pie crust. And yes, this is a pie shield that I made using aluminum foil. I tried using the store-bought pie shields, both the metal one and the silicone one, and neither one worked out for me after testing this many times. So I decided to go this route instead. So after baking in the oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes, you're going to adjust the temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to allow the pie to bake for an additional 40 to 50 minutes. And once it's done, you're going to carefully remove it from the oven. I say carefully because if you're too aggressive, you can end up with cracks on the surface of the pie. And carefully remove the pie shield as well. This was to prevent the crust from burning as it baked in the oven. And you want the pie to rest for a minimum of 2 hours at room temperature, as this will allow time for the filling to firm up before you cut into it. And there you have it. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more of these recipes, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.